Hello and welcome to the Wildcard Rewind podcast. Week 6 is now in the books. We've had a fantastic London games. Let's get rewinding.
I just wanna rewind to when we were young and hard. Back to all those good times. Take me back to the start.
So we had a fantastic week 6. A lot of injuries, which we're going to come on to in a minute. And all three of us are actually at the London games yesterday to see the Ravens beat the Titans. It was a really interesting game. Paul, what did you think? Did you have fun yesterday?
I had an amazing time. I said to you before the show, we had 4 guys to our left that were come over from Germany. They were boozing. We had a row behind us that were boozing. My brothers was boozing. Unfortunately, I was driving yesterday. But we got the party started and we were all up and dancing and singing and everything and having the best time ever. So it was amazing. Oh, and the NFL was good, you know?
Yeah, and the game was all right as well. The game was all right. Anna, what did you think about the game itself?
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I mean, I always thought the Ravens were going to win, and ultimately they did. I think as soon as Tannehill got injured, I was like, right, game over. But that offense really was struggling, wasn't it, to be honest? But it was great to see. I really enjoyed seeing Lamar. Like, obviously, he is an AFC North foe of mine as a Bengals fan, but I'm really impressed with his game. He is a really impressive quarterback. So it was great to see him doing his things. And I really enjoyed that part of it. And that Titans D, you know, they're still pretty good. And it was great to see them at work too.
We were saying as well, like seeing Derrick Henry live was really strange because he obviously has no elusiveness to him, but not that he ever has. But we were watching him kind of going for 3 yards and then 2 yards and then 3 yards. And just when you were thinking, I don't think Derrick Henry has it anymore. You know, I think this is it. Boom, Wildcat, 64 yards, huge. And it was a really strange experience watching that. You kind of got the feeling that he just needs to wear the defense down in order for it to work. And you guys were obviously, I think, but both you guys were down the other end to me. So I got to see watching, and I tend to watch kind of see where receivers are lining up, and then suddenly spotted. I was like, hang on, that's not Ryan Tannehill. What's happening? And then genuinely from the stand I was in, there were chants going up of like Wildcat, Wildcat, as everyone got very excited for that play in particular. But it was really good fun. It was a really, really fun game. I love the London games. We were sat behind a couple of Ravens fans who'd come over all the way from Baltimore. And I could tell that they were American before the game because when the anthem started playing, first of all, they stood up really quickly, but they also both cried while the American national anthem was playing.
That's so American, isn't it? Good on them.
At least they had fun, and I'm glad you guys did too. I had a great time as well. Buys this week. Obviously, we have week 6 in the books, and it was a really, really interesting week. It felt slightly lower scoring than the last few weeks, aside from obviously Raheem Mostert. Looking ahead to week 7, we have a few more buys and a fair amount of fancy relevant players. So on by next week, we have the Panthers, the Bengals, the Cowboys, the Titans, the Texans, and the Jets. So obviously worth keeping an eye out for any of the huge players you have from most of those teams. There's a fair few really fancy relevant players on there. And I was going to make fun of the Bengals, but it seems, Hannah, that they might actually be good again, maybe?
Yeah, well, they're better than they were. I'm hoping by next, 2 weeks, they'll actually be decent, but they've got the 49ers, so I'm not holding out too much hope for that game. But to be fair, the start of the game, the offense looked great, and then they were terrible for the second half, and the defense kept us in that. I mean, we could have easily lost that game for sure, but we're seeing some signs of life, so I'm happy.
I was delighted that you didn't because it meant that the Rams were the only NFC West team to win yesterday. I know you were obviously midway through driving back up, Paul. I don't know if you enjoyed watching highlights today or anything.
What highlights? What highlights? I've not looked at any highlights. I've not looked at any game. I'm not a fan anymore.
No.
No. I didn't expect much from us, to be honest. I didn't. I think this is the Cardinals that we all expected. The Cardinals that turned up against the Cowboys were a glitch in the matrix, and what we see every other week is the Cardinals that we all expect to be here this year, you know? So,
Yeah. It was nice to see the Rams looking a bit more like the Rams. It was really interesting in the second half that clearly someone had had a word in Sean McVay's ear and been like, run the ball, run the ball. We ran on 9 straight plays to open up the second half, and it was genuinely 9 straight runs, and then the first pass was a touchdown. Um, but let's go back straight into the big news of the week. And I mean, we were obviously at the game and then missed a fair chunk of red zone and was sort of catching up on things when we got in. I watched a little bit of red zone in the stadium, and then by the time I got home, I wasn't really watching. So when I looked to see sort of the breaking news for me and Rappaport and the sleeper notifications on the injuries, I think every player got injured yesterday, and particularly looking at quarterbacks as well. So the players who went down in some form yesterday, and there's obviously not a huge amount of information yet on what they're going to be going forwards. But Trevor Lawrence, Ryan Tannehill, Justin Fields, Baker Mayfield, Jimmy Garoppolo, Deebo Samuel, David Montgomery, Kyron Williams, and this is the big one, Christian McCaffrey. Um, I'm out of breath just from listing the amount of players, and especially that's 5 starting quarterbacks as well. With that in mind, Hannah, with the quarterbacks being injured, and it looks like all of these could at least miss 1 week, are you at all interested, especially in Superflex leagues, in any of the backups that might become available if any of these quarterbacks miss time?
So my short answer, Lewis, is no. You know, to be honest, when you're looking at the backups, there aren't that many backups that I would feel not confident, but at least like okay to start. So one is someone like Gardner Minshew, who obviously started this week, and we saw what happened there. So the QBs we're looking at here, if potentially all of these quarterbacks go out, are CJ Beathard, Malik Willis, Kyle Trask, Brian Hoyer. And to me, there's none of them really that I'm that interested in. The only guy that I would maybe have a very mild interest in a Superflex league would be a Kyle Trask, mainly because of the weapons around him, and potentially he could have some form of competence, but I wouldn't totally trust that. And to be honest, I would only have him as a bench stash. Obviously, if I'm desperate, I have to play him, I have to play him. But if I can, I would only stash him and just see, is he going to do anything while Baker is out? But I do think that if you have to start any of these guys, there's no way that you're winning championships. Now, this actually feeds into my what I've learned from this week point, so I won't talk about it too much. But I also think, you know, you don't necessarily have to pick them up. But as I say, we won't talk about it too much at this point. But is this just me, Lewis and Paul, or does this seem like absolutely like injury apocalypse this year? Like, I know that it's a violent sport, there's always injuries, it always happens, but I genuinely feel like so many of these top fantasy relevant players are getting injured, and they're also getting so severely injured that they're ending up on IR for multiple weeks. So you're kind of struggling to cope when they all go down.
Yeah, it feels like everyone is struggling at the minute. Like, this is going to be a fantasy season where it's won by whoever's smartest on waivers. Like, when I look at all of my teams and I want to sort of, start putting tweets out with screenshots of, a roster with Dobbins, Chubb, and Connor on IR, and then I'm like, well, everyone's the same. Everyone's teams are the same. What do you think, Paul? Do you think it seems like it's kind of more injuries than normal?
Yeah, so like me and my brothers were chatting about it yesterday. We were like, I'm sure we say this every year and go, the injuries are so bad. And I don't know if it's just this year or maybe we said it last year, but it feels insane. It feels like there is literally, I said to Mags on the show that I do with him, if we get a week where nobody gets an injury, he has to do the show in his pants. because at the moment it just feels like we're not going to have a week where somebody hasn't gone down. I was just looking while you guys were having a chat, see if there's any more reports come out about any of the players. Now, obviously, you've mentioned the teams are on bye. We've got Panthers, Bengals, Cowboys, Titans, Texans, Jets. So we've already got 6 teams on bye. I'm now looking at this going, Justin Fields is expected to miss Sunday. Trevor Lawrence has got a knee sprain. He's expected to miss Thursday night. Well, hang on. We're now 8 starting QBs down. Now, I know there's backups, like you said, there are backups, but, you don't really want any of them. But now, we're now losing so many QBs that it's just a minefield out there. And I suppose this is where you win or lose your league, isn't it? How you deal with that period where you've got bye weeks, injuries, and everything like that. How you deal with that is how it shows if you can be separated from the others.
I do think it's tough though, because I think a lot of this is how savvy you were on waivers early on in the season. Like at this point, the waiver eye is pretty thin. So, like you say, these backup QBs, no one's really interested in them. Yes, we'll still get the occasional running back that might give us, decent weeks, but there's not that many there because people know who the primary backups are and they're starting to stash them now because we're getting so many injuries. So the waiver wire feels so thin. So, I think if you're having to be reactive, it's kind of too late. Like that beginning of the season when there was like a nice glut of guys on waivers is where I think you're going to win or lose. Like if at this point you're like, oh my God, my team's devastated, I need to go to waivers. Too late.
And I think that leads us really nicely onto the next thing that I wanted to talk about, which is looking obviously at the 49ers from last week. First of all, it's just nice to think that they lost. It was nice to see them lose a game. I was really excited about that and celebrated the missed field goal as much as I celebrated any of the Rams touchdowns this week. But huge for the 49ers. They lost both Deebo Samuel and Christian McCaffrey during that game. I thought it was really interesting seeing the way it obviously affected Purdy. Purdy is a huge conversation right now of how good is he? Is he just a product of a system and weapons, or is he a good quarterback in his own rights? Which I know you'll touch on a little bit later, Paul. But I want to know your thoughts. If they do both miss time, does Brandon Ayuk absolutely soar in your sort of rankings going forwards? And would you say that Jordan Mason is probably the priority waiver ad this week? He obviously scored a touchdown once Christian McCaffrey had gone out, but kind of what do you think the outlook is for him going forwards?
Yeah, so going back to what you said, CMC now, I think his injury is a lot worse than what they're letting on because he came back into the game, didn't he? And he tried to play and he couldn't play. So that's, to me, I'm a little bit worried about what that's going to be. He may be somebody that's missing the next few weeks. Now, what we've seen when he went out was Jordan Mason he seemed to be the guy that Kyle Shanahan trusted more than the others. So yes, to me, he is a definite pickup this week. But I'd also be a little bit tempted, and this may be my love for the player, but Elijah Mitchell, we've seen Elijah Mitchell do things before. He can run the ball. And I think that maybe you'll find that Shanahan maybe split the role and not give it to one predominant back. I think it may be a case of whoever's got the hot hand going in. Jordan Mason could come out next week, run the ball, fumble it, give it to Elijah Mitchell, doesn't fumble it. All of a sudden, then we're going, Elijah Mitchell's the hot hand. He's going to keep getting the ball. But ultimately, the bigger picture, you just want the running back in a Kyle Shanahan style offense. We all know that. That's what you want. And going to Ayuk, I think he is arrows up. Because, I know we say when one goes out, you don't necessarily fall into that role like you do a running back. But Ayuk is somebody that has a shared role in that offense, the same as sort of Deebo Samuel. And I think he now steps up and he'll get more work. My only worry is Brock Purdy. Now, Brock Purdy he's not a great QB. He is a good QB. He's in a good system, which is making him look like a good QB. Yesterday, you needed to put that team on your shoulders, okay, on your back. He needed to be the guy that steps up, and he didn't. Now, I'm not saying he won't do that every week because the Browns is actually a really good defense and they've been doing quite well this year, So you've got to give them some sort of credit. But I kind of feel that we've seen the 49ers sort of fall apart a little bit yesterday. And like you were saying, it was nice to see them lose. And that's probably our hatred for them because we're both we're both in the same division as them. But it felt like they sort of fell apart. It felt like they lost a couple of their pieces that was holding them together, and they just started to fall apart. And to me, if I was a head coach, I'd be looking at that going, they're beatable. We could beat them. And I think that's the interesting thing now. They may be getting the Vikings at the right time, though. So I don't think the Vikings are a team that are going to turn up there and go, oh, we could beat the 49ers. The week after, now I think they've got a team the week after that could turn them over and really like open them up. So we'll see about that. But go back to it. Yes, Jordan Mason definitely add, and Ayuk is arrows up if Brock Purdy can learn to throw the ball more.
I don't know whether or not, Hannah, you know who the team is after playing the 49ers in 2 weeks, because I'm looking at the schedule and your lack of sort of immediate reaction.
Oh, it's us,
tells
isn't
me
it?
that-
I just mentioned it.
That's
I was not paying, like,
I could tell Paul was trying to bait you out. To be fair, actually, by complimenting the Bengals.
Yeah, I was naively paying zero attention, but absolutely we're going to turn them over for sure. To be fair, like I do think they didn't have CMC at the time, but we played them a couple of seasons ago and we did beat them. Or did they beat us? No, I think they beat us ultimately, but it was a really close game. Like I do think when we are playing at our best, we can match up with them reasonably well. I'm not saying that we'll beat them, but I do think we could go toe to toe with them. And it could be a close one, similar as we have done in the past with the Chiefs. We'll see. If CMC is out and Debo, then I think we've got more of a chance actually.
I was just looking about CMC's injury, and like you say, Paul, it seems like no one really knows what's going on. Like we know it's an oblique injury. Adam Schefter a couple of hours ago on the Pat McAfee show said that he knows that he's going to see some specialists today. The 49ers don't know if he's going to miss 1 game, 2 games, no games, but I think if you have CMC, you need to be prioritizing one of Mitchell or Mason and be prepared to go without him. It's fascinating then looking at like the first round of the draft this year that the right answer just was Tyreek Hill. Like Jefferson IR, CMC might be about to miss time. Chase underperformed the first few weeks. Cup was on IR. The answer was Tyreek Hill, apparently.
Right. Going back to these 49ers running backs, I can't decide at this point whether Mason played more because Mitchell was coming off injury and it was his first week back, and so they were easing him in, or whether now they like Mason more than Mitchell and Mason is going to be the better ad. I genuinely don't know which it's going to be, and whichever one I choose is going to be the opposite, because that's what always seems to happen.
Okay, pick one.
Well, I want it. My head wants to say go back to Mitchell, but I'm not convinced. Do you know what I mean? I feel a bit on the fence with it. But ultimately, you're probably going to have to pick one.
You've got to pick one. You've got to pick one now because you said you're going to get it wrong. So we want to know what you pick so we can all pick the opposite player.
Okay, well, I'm going to say Mitchell because I think maybe Mason's the right one. So I'm going to help you out there. But I don't know. I just don't know. The problem with Mitchell is it's always injured, and I do wonder whether some of these injuries have affected, his explosiveness and et cetera.
Yeah. We can move on to our first section. I just quickly want to touch upon, obviously, our sponsor, Rashid Shaheed, caught a touchdown yesterday, got the first touchdown in the Saints game. And when I was watching Red Zone, still in the Spurs Stadium after the game, I cheered and shouted, Rashid Shaheed, to sort of bemusement from my friends near me as to why I was so excited by sort of the wide receiver 3 on the Saints. But whenever I shout his name in public, we get an extra huge paycheck from our sponsor.
We haven't mentioned him for a while, have we? So that he was just reminding us that he's still there
by playing well. Let's go on to our first segment, Rewind the Tape, where we look at things we learned from the previous week that helped us as fantasy managers. Hannah, you've sort of hinted at what you've learned from the last week, but why don't you tell us a little bit more?
Yeah, so we kind of mentioned it earlier in the show that it was a reasonably low scoring week compared to the monster weeks we've had so far this year. But what I'd learned this week was actually you don't have to start a quarterback in your Superflex spot. I think people think because it's Superflex, I must start a quarterback in it. but you don't have to. Now, it was a particularly bad week this week for quarterbacks. So if you have a look at all the QB2, so let's say everyone owns obviously you have to start a QB, everyone. So everyone, let's say, owns the top 12 QBs. So when we're looking at the QB2, so that's QB 13 to 24 this week, they scored a range of points from 13.2 for QB 13 down to 7, which is a QB 24. So let's say you were clever enough to draft the QB 13 on the week, and you played him in your Superflex spot. Here are some players that you could have started that actually got more points than the QB 13 this week. So this is in PPR leagues, by the way. So this is Wan'Dale Robinson, Jameson Williams, Curtis Samuel, Tyler Boyd, Chubba Hubbard, and Jonnu Smith. So all ones that, you probably were kind of in consideration for a flex spot, but you probably kind of kept on your bench. They all outperformed a QB2 this week. So just because it says Superflex doesn't mean you have to start a quarterback. And if I'm looking at considering starting any of those backups that we talked about earlier, I would much rather put a boom bust player, skill player into that spot. Someone that if they get a touchdown, then they're going to probably outperform some crappy backup that gets a million sacks and throws the ball 2 times and 10 interceptions. I think you got to shoot for the moon with a skill player. Rashid Shaheed, someone like that, put them in there. If they get a touchdown or 2, then they'll have probably outperformed these backups that you might end up shoving in because it's a quarterback.
Yeah, I think it's a really smart one, and I think it's definitely super relevant going into this week where we're missing a huge amount of starting quarterbacks and a huge amount of those sort of top options, with a bunch on bye and a bunch injured as well. Mine from the last week, and I think this was something I found really interesting being at the game as well, is to kind of believe what coaches are telling you. This plays into what the situation with the Rams and Cam Akers last year, where we kept starting Cam Akers and it kept not working. And Sean McVay was publicly telling us, or slightly more privately, I don't like him. I don't like this player. I don't really want him on the team. If teams are going and spending draft capital or free agency money or just giving snaps to other positions, to other players, it's not our job as analysts to go, well, I think they should be giving it this way. So I'm particularly looking at Rashad Bateman and Odell Beckham Jr. I think Rashad Bateman has been a fantasy darling for the last few seasons, even though he's never really produced. And we really saw he can't catch the ball. He's not it. Nelson Aguilar was actually looking way more effective than him. I actually found myself watching Nelson Aguilar and watching him get open on nearly every play. But Nelson Aguilar is much better at blocking as well. So he was seeing a lot more time in 2 wide receiver sets. With Bateman and OBJ, we might want it to happen. But if the coach is telling us that it's not going to, if the coach is telling us by the amount of snaps you're seeing, the amount of targets they're getting, the amount of work they're getting, if they're saying, I don't really like this player, I don't think they have a valuable role, we shouldn't be praying for a breakout that just isn't really going to happen. And I am particularly targeting that at Tom Strachan and Rich Cooling for the Rashad Bateman breakout, which is never happening. Paul, I know last week we spoke a bit about sort of rookie quarterbacks and running backs. Do you want to carry on and talk us through your thoughts on the wide receivers and tight ends?
Yeah, so like I said last week, I just think it's about time we did a little check on the rookies and see who we're liking, see who we're disliking, sort of seeing what we think maybe could happen to a couple of these guys. Can they step up? Can they do better than they are? So I've put it in my order. I know you may disagree with this, but Jordan Addison, Zay Flowers, Puka Nacua, JSN, Tank Dell, Rashee Rice, Josh Downs, Quinton Johnson. Now, is there anyone that I've missed off this list? Is there anyone that is way too high on this list? Is there anyone on this list that you think the second half of this, well, I say second half of the season, but in the next sort of 10, 11 weeks of the season that you feel that they're going to step up and maybe be more than what they have been so far? We'll start with you then, Lewis. Is there anyone that stands out to you?
The really big one for me is I debate how low to put JSN right now. Like, obviously, he was the first wide receiver drafted. He was nearly everyone's wide receiver one in the class. Went to what we thought was a good landing spot, although obviously he was going to start off as a third wide receiver on the Seahawks. And we thought, he'll be really phased into the offense once Tyler Lockett maybe moves on. Tyler Lockett's 31, then he can take over that role. The problem is it gets to a stage that you just don't know when it's going to happen, and I need to see it soon if I'm going to believe in JSN. There's a threshold that rookie wide receivers normally need to hit in their first season in order to succeed, and I think it's about 600-700. I can't remember exactly. I'll have a look. JSN is not on pace for that. He's seen barely any target so far, and I really thought the Seahawks run by last week. Like, it's really a big thing that teams will go and buy and embed the rookie into the offense a little more, and then they'll come out flying. And he did have his best week, but like, it still wasn't great. The same is then true for Quentin Johnston. Like, I'm really tempted to say, I'm looking at Tank Dell, Rashee Rice, Josh Downs, that sort of player, and have them way ahead, even though QJ was drafted in the first round, because if he can't perform with Mike Williams out, if he's still being beat out by Josh Palmer, when's he going to? Like, when's it going to happen for him? It'll be really interesting tonight, actually. I think Josh Palmer's missing the game against the Cowboys. And if Quentin Johnston is beat out by whoever on earth is the wide receiver 4 on the Chargers, then like, it's just not going to happen. It's let's see, Darius Davis, who's another rookie. If it doesn't happen for him tonight, like, I'm starting to think this is never going to happen. How about you, Hannah?
So, Paul, I'm just interested. Is this list based on their talent or based on fantasy value?
So this is my personal preference list.
But is that from like how you would draft them in your fantasy league, or how?
So yes, yes. If I was drafted now, this is how I'd draft them.
Okay, fine. So I think that ultimately I would probably, I do like Addison. I think he's great, and I think he's great as a wide receiver too. But I personally would probably put Puka at the top because we know he can do it, because he did it. He did it for 4 weeks with Cooper Kupp out. I personally think that in this system, I know that Puka can perform. Addison has been great. He's been quite boom busty, but we're going to find out now, I guess, in the next few weeks with Jefferson out. But I don't see Addison putting up 20 odd points every week like Puka did for 4 weeks of the season. So I personally would put Puka as number one. Yeah, I would.
We did see, first of all, boom busty as a phrase, big fan of that.
Thanks.
We did see this week Puka struggle a little bit with Kupp fully into the lineup, and he actually had quite a bad drop that would have been a touchdown. And actually, I think he's actually been responsible for the most drops in the NFL, certainly up until week 5. So that that this week was a little worrying for him. But the thing is, you can't produce for 5 weeks the way he has without it being a real thing. So I definitely think there's an argument for it. It's really interesting when it comes to like your prior thoughts compared to what you're seeing in front of you, whether you're brave enough to have Puka rookie wide receiver 1.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I totally get what you're saying. Like, now Kupp's back, he is going to have those dud weeks. But I do ultimately think if you're looking at them from a kind of, who do I know that is going to produce for me? Because at this point, we're figuring out who ultimately is going to be a fantasy producer going forward. And I think the most reliable guy out of all these is probably going to be Puka, followed by Flowers. Or you could probably switch those, I do think, because I think Flowers is going to be the wide receiver 1 on that team. And it's not like you can say that Mark Andrews is taking all of the targets, because he's really not doing that much this season. Like, ultimately, Zay Flowers could be the number 1 target earner on the Baltimore Ravens moving forward. I believe that could easily be the case, because yes, Mark Andrews is great, but he's not been doing anywhere near what he was doing last season. with Lamar as he is this season. So I personally think that those two, I think they ultimately, I know they're going to be reliable fantasy options moving forward. I think Addison is going to be great as a wide receiver too, but I do think that ultimately he's going to have more games where he's in the shadows, because he's talented, but I just think that he's much better with Jefferson or some kind of big wide receiver one on the field. And there's going to be games where Jefferson gets, pretty much all the targets, or Jefferson and Hawkinson get a lot of the targets, and Addison gets one or two, So I would have in third. And then actually, like at the moment, I do think if we get an injury on the Seahawks, JSN will become more valuable. And I do think he probably will be able to perform, whereas I'm not convinced that QJ is going to be able to. I do have more faith in JSN's talent than I do in Quentin Johnston. So I think although JSN is a disappointment at the moment, I think ultimately he probably will grow into a role. Whether that be this season or not, I don't know. But I still wouldn't be too scared of him, even though he's not done too much.
He's going to be like do you remember the Sky Moore breakout hype this offseason? JSN is going to be the dynasty darling of next offseason, where people are going to be like, Lockett's either moving on or aging out. Like, it's going to be JSN season. And if it doesn't happen this season, it's not going to happen. Paul, talk us through your thoughts on the rookie tight ends.
This won't take too long, So the rookie tight ends, if anyone tries to tell me that Sam Laporta is not the tight end one in this rookie class, you're wrong. But the next three, I think, could go any way and every way. So I've got it Kincaid, Musgrave, Mayer, and Mayer's had a couple of good weeks now, so you could probably move him above Musgrave, but I think I think them three are just all sort of the same tier. They're similar players. They're similar sort of values as such. But Sam Laporta, let's just talk about Sam Laporta and how good he is.
Yeah.
Anyone want to disagree?
No, I'm not disagreeing at all. I made a note here that Keep Trade Cut, which is a really strange resource because it's incredibly reactive, has Sam Laporta as the dynasty tight end one right now. And I'm intrigued to hear your guys' thoughts. He's not mine. I still have, for sure, Kelsey and Andrews ahead of him. I'd probably have at least TJ Hawkinson over him as well. But I haven't really looked at my dynasty rankings in a bit. But what do you guys think? Sam Laporta?
I'm going to go first with this one, okay? Now, it's very, very difficult. So it depends on how you sort of play your dynasty now, okay? Now, I always look at sort of dynasty and your rankings as like a 2-year window. I remember Kyle Pitts coming out and people calling me absolutely mad because I had Travis Kelce as the tight end 1 and Kyle Pitts down at like tight end 3. And I was like, well, I'd rather have Travis Kelce and Mark Andrews. And people were like, oh my God, you're losing your absolute marbles here. Now, I'm going to try and bring everyone back down to earth and do the same again, okay? Do you want Travis Kelce on your dynasty team at the Chiefs for the next 2 years? Or do you want Sam Laporta over him? I want Kelce at the Chiefs. He's done it time and time and time before, and he's constantly doing it, and he still does it now. I want the guy that I know is going to perform, and I want Travis Kelce. But in 12 months' time, maybe 2 years, then you've got an argument then to say, do you know what? Maybe Kelce isn't the tight end one. He's getting to the latter end of his career. But at the moment, Keep Trade Cut is garbage for rankings and how they work everything out. I think it's absolutely awful, So I try not to take too much from Keep Trade Cut, but I do think Sam Laporta is a very, very good tight end, and I do think he is well worthy of being ranked in the top. I'll say the top 6 at the moment, at least. If not even the top 5. He definitely deserves that ranking. But tight end 1 is, to me, it's a bit too rich.
I'm gonna come to you with Hannah. I'm gonna come to you on this one, Hannah. We spent a long time a couple of weeks ago trashing Kyle Pitts, who obviously, as Paul mentions, was seen as this huge kind of dynasty darling. This is the most valuable non-quarterback. Would you take Kyle Pitts or Sam Laporta in dynasty right now?
Oh, that is a
I'm glad you got that question, Hannah. Get ready for the Twitter abuse.
it's tough though, isn't it? Because ultimately we know that Kyle Pitts is talented. And the past 2 weeks, he has shown that he is talented and he can perform as a tight end one. The issue with him has been, I think, this season, two things. One is injury and two is scheme. And neither of those things seem to have been working for him thus far. I do think if Kyle Pitts was on a different team, we would be talking very differently about him in fantasy than we are at the moment. So I think ultimately, in terms of talent level, I think he's probably a more talented tight end than Sam Laporta from a player point of view. However, Sam Laporta is being utilised regularly and effectively every single week. For me, I do think dynasty rankings are interesting because if I am a contender, actually, who is more valuable to me is very different to if I am a rebuild. Like if I'm a rebuild, I don't want Kelsey on my team. What's he doing? Giving me too many points, meaning that I'm not getting a decent pick, in the next rookie draft. And he's just kind of wasting away and losing value, basically, because I don't need him. So to me, actually, if I'm a rebuilder, Sam Laporta probably is I do want him more on my team than I want Kelsey, because I know that he is likely going to be, or hopefully going to be performing well for a number of years moving forward. So by the time that I finish my rebuild in 12, 24 months time, he is going to be a nice, consistent tight end one who I don't need to think about. He's going to be there. He's going to be great, hopefully. The one concern I have about Sam Laporta is Ben Johnson. It's Johnson, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's probably, my suspicion is he's going to be a head coach next year. So he is leaving. So the question is, what is that offense going to be like without him there? And I do wonder whether they have a mini meltdown, because Goff is great within this scheme. But when he goes, is the scheme going to change? Is Goff going to struggle if they choose to keep him, which I think they're going to have to now because they're doing so well? Then is he going to be as good as he has been this season, if you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I can absolutely see it. And I think the talent's winning out at the minute. It helped when they didn't have Jameson Williams and they haven't had Jahmyr Gibbs. So there's more volume available to him. But when a rookie tight end produces to this level, I'm interested in him in the long haul. I would be really interested to see how the Lions are next year when we assume Ben Johnson leaves. But maybe they'll be reflecting off the back of a Super Bowl win anyway. So let's move on to our studs of the week. This is our section where we look at an under-the-radar player who could overperform and exceed expectations, looking ahead to week 7. But a quick rewind to the week just gone. We like to review how we did. Paul and I generally did pretty well. We both went for Chiefs players. I had Rashee Rice, who finishes a wide receiver 31 on the week. Hannah, you're smirking at me because I said that Paul and I did really well. Rashee Rice finished with 4 receptions for 72 yards, which was 50 yards more than any other Chiefs wide receiver, which is pretty good. Isaiah Pacheco had 16 carries for 62 yards and 6 receptions for 36 yards. So a really nice week, RB13. Hannah, your pick, Cade Otton. Really, really strong week. 1 pass, caught for 15 yards.
Right. I have to butt in here now, Lewis, because Paul, but you gave me terrible, terrible abuse for picking Breece Hall, and you then went and picked Isaiah Pacheco, the running back one on the Chiefs. Come on now, Paul. You picked like an under-the-radar player.
You picked a round 3 running back.
But Breece Hall was not performing.
I went for Isaiah Pacheco as like a round 9 running back.
The running back one on the Chiefs does not
children.
Does not constitute under the radar. And
I will put you both in timeout if you cannot behave.
Just to point out, Cade Otton did nearly get a touchdown. It just got broken up. All right.
Hannah's pick nearly worked this week. It
How
nearly
many?
worked.
How many? I don't know. The leagues I commission, you don't get any points for nearly touchdowns. But how many did you get in your leagues?
Loads. Well, sorry, but I just think Paul's cheated again. Let's see who he's picked this week. Oh, another obvious player that's what a wide receiver too already. Sorry, Paul. That's not under the radar.
I could go deeper if you want. I could change it.
Well, Hannah, given I can see your pick, I'm really interested into your stubbornness here. Who have you gone for this week?
Okay, well, I'm actually going back to the well because I think this week could be K Dotton's week, right? So hear me out. This week the Bucks have the Falcons. They're actually one of the defenses that gave up the most fantasy points to tight end so far this season. But they've also given some of the fewest points to wide receivers this season. So I'm figuring that maybe I think they're actually much better defense than they have been in previous years. And I think they're pretty kind of stalwart and pretty good. So I'm thinking that maybe Mike Evans and Chris Godwin are going to have a little bit more of a challenging week. And therefore, K. Dotton is going to get in there and get a couple of touchdowns and show that he's a tight end one. And yay, I win Fantasy Stud of the Week.
Well, I'm such a huge fan of the resoluteness of going, I picked a player, he massively underperformed. I'm going to pick him again. I was right last time. I'm going to pick him again. It will come good this time.
He's got a good matchup, so come on. I'm going to throw. You got to throw it at the wall multiple times, and eventually it'll stick, right?
Especially if Baker is out, like new. I was going to say rookie quarterbacks, but I suppose Kyle Trask essentially would be a rookie quarterback. Having a safety blanket in the tight end could be quite interesting. Paul, have you decided to change what you're going for and gone for something more obscure?
Yep.
Right. Come on now. If you now get it right, I will praise you.
So I was going to go for Gabe Davis,
but yeah,
at the Bills, and now I'm going to go for rookie wide receiver Michael Wilson from the Arizona Cardinals. Okay, and he's playing the Seahawks, and whenever we play the Seahawks, there's always plenty of points. It's always a bit of a shootout, and I just see him. I just see my guy getting a touchdown, and maybe 4 or 5 passes, and he's going to get like 60, 70 yards. Not one pass for 15 yards. I think he'll get more than that. So I'm going to go for rookie wide receiver at the Arizona Cardinals, Michael Wilson. Okay.
So if he doesn't get a touchdown and 60 or 70 yards, does that mean that you've not won? And
no, if he gets one catch for 16 yards, he's better than K. Dotton.
K. Dotton last week, maybe not this week.
I've been really impressed with Michael Wilson. I think there's something really interesting about being the only receiver of any size on the team that means that he can win down the boundary. Like I know he had quite a big week a few weeks ago where I think he went for 76 yards and 2 touchdowns. Been really impressed with him actually. I've gone for Roschon Johnson, running back for the Bears. Deontay Foreman in DFS this week was absolute chalk, and I really avoided it because I just couldn't really see it happening. He did underperform, and it was because Roschon was in concussion protocol, and Khalil Herbert is obviously on IR. I could be really interested to see. Roschon was someone that I really loved coming out of college. He was the backup to Bijan Robinson. The Raiders, who they're playing against, are the 20th worst team against running backs, so not great. He's only arrested in 60% of the leagues, and it could be the Bears playing with a backup quarterback. So I wouldn't be surprised to see him get a huge amount of work if he is back from the concussion protocol. Let's move on to our scare of the week. Once again, I promise I'm just telling the truth here. Paul and I did quite well, and Hannah didn't. I will admit though, so I went for David Montgomery versus the Bucks. He did underperform, but he also left due to injury, so I think that one kind of counts as a nothing. Paul went for Josh Jacobs, who was okay, but he was incredibly inefficient. The only reason he did quite well is because he had 25 carries, but he averaged 3.08 yards per carry. So the theory was definitely right there. I think with you, Hannah, you went for AJ Brown, who was wide receiver 6 on the week. But I will say the Jets, one of the reasons you went into it was that he would be tracked by Sauce Gardner. The Jets were actually missing their top 2 corners. They were both ruled out a few days beforehand. And the theory was definitely there because Devonta Smith and Dallas Goedert both underperformed. It's just, AJ Brown was wide receiver
Beast.
6 on the week.
So, as soon as I saw that Sauce, I was like, oh, I've lost that one there. Fail.
So
to be fair, didn't they sign 2 players to their practice squad as well? So they were like literally, they were just finding whoever. If you could play corner on Saturday, if you could play corner on Sunday, they were like, "Yeah, put this jersey on, mate. Go and try and stop them catching the ball, like, you know." So, and I'll admire you, Hannah, because AJ Brown is a big call as a fantasy scare because he is an elite wide receiver, like, you know.
I reckon if Sauce had played, I reckon he wouldn't have been a wide receiver 1. That would be my. But hey, I might be wrong. Who knows?
Would have been interesting. I mean, the Jets won anyway. Paul, who do you have as your fantasy scare of the week?
So I've gone for this in a theory that basically if Fields doesn't play, so I'm going for DJ Moore, and I think I'm not trying to say that Fields is the reason that DJ Moore catches so many passes and so many yards, because Fields is not a great QB, but he's going to be better than the backup, you know. I'm not sure who the backup is there. I can't think off the top of my head at the Bears, but DJ Moore is going to be somebody that's not going to get much. The Bears are not going to do well this week. So I've gone for DJ Moore.
It's Tyson Bagent is the backup quarterback of the Bears.
Yeah, I stick with my decision.
Yeah, I think the fact you don't know who it is probably not a great sign. Although, I don't know, DJ Moore has had a couple of big weeks, but Tyson Bagent can't be that much worse than Justin Fields throwing the ball. Hannah, who do you think could underperform this week?
So we've actually been having a very long discussion about this guy just 5 minutes ago. So I'm actually going to say that Sam Laporta could well have a fantasy scare of this week. So they're playing the Baltimore Ravens this week, and they've basically locked down tight ends pretty much for the beginning of the season, and they've allowed the fewest points to the position. Now, maybe I'll be in my hat, especially if like Monty's out and Gibbs is out. Like, they're not going to have many options, so maybe they're going to split him out wide as a wide receiver or something like that. So, as I say, it may well backfire on me here, but I'm going to be brave, and why not get it wrong and have Paul laugh at me, because occasionally he's right.
I wouldn't laugh at you. I promise.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. I believe you thousands wouldn't, Paul.
I am concerned that I am eventually going to have to do the show on my own and put you guys in a separate room to just bicker and hash out whatever issue clearly happened before I joined the podcast.
No, we've got a great rivalry, you know. Hannah's normally right and I'm normally wrong, but when I'm right and Hannah's wrong, it is something that I treasure for the rest of my life. And this week, I am right and Hannah's wrong.
The thing with the old iteration of Rewind is that obviously we had predictions every week, and literally every week Paul was wrong, and it was just one of Mags and I's favourite pastime, laughing at how terrible Paul's picks were. And unfortunately, it doesn't seem to have kind of passed over onto this iteration. So now Paul is getting one back on me, and that's not very fair, and I don't like it.
My fantasy scare of the week is Kirk Cousins. I'm really interested to see how he fares without. I think all of us are quite interested to see how he fares without Justin Jefferson. This week just gone, it wasn't great. They did beat the Bears, but he only passed for 1 touchdown and 181 yards. He also had 2 fumbles, which is pretty bad. They are playing against the 49ers this week. They are the 3rd best team against quarterbacks. I wouldn't be surprised, in the same way that I'm worried against a little bit about the Dolphins playing the Eagles this week, because I think when you have a team coming off their first loss, they're going to be playing angry. And I just wouldn't be surprised to see Nick Bosa absolutely take it out on Kirk Cousins. Kirk is he's QB7 on the year, which I was really interested in. He was incredible that he was starting in kind of career form, even though they went, I think, 0-3 to start the year. So I think I'll be really interested to see, playing the 49ers is incredibly hard, especially without Justin Jefferson. Kirk has performed quite well, but I think, without JJ, it's going to be really interesting to see how he does. So our final segment is our wild card of the week, where we each give you a hot take that we think could happen. We all were wrong this week, which is at least nice and consistent that no one can make fun of each other. I
Oh,
said
we'll find a way. We'll find a way, Lewis.
that I said that the Giants, if they started Tyrod Taylor, would get their first defensive touchdown of a first half in any game, which they didn't, but they were leading the Bills 6-0 at halftime, which was absolutely mad when I saw that this morning. Hannah, you said that Lamar would rush for more yards than Derrick Henry, which didn't happen. Lamar had 62, Derrick Henry had 97. Obviously, the majority of that was that monster run that we mentioned earlier. Paul, you said that the Titans would beat the Ravens. With all three of us having been at the game yesterday, I don't think that was ever on the cards.
I still cheered for them, though. I still cheered for the Titans. Amongst all the Ravens fans, every time the Titans did something, I was the one that was stood up going, come on!
I, after a while, was mostly cheering for Justin Tucker because that was the majority of the game. We decided about 5 or 6 beers deep at this point that every time there was a field goal, it would be funny to go absolutely mad like it was the thing we were most excited for. And I lost my voice towards the end of the game because there were so many field goals and I'd done so much screaming.
My older brother had his Justin Tucker jersey on, so was like turning into a bit of a giddy child when Justin Tucker came on. He was like, woo! So me and my little brother, as brothers do, were taking the piss out of him because he was getting so excited with Justin Tucker.
Before we get on to the wild card of the week, were you guys paying attention to any of the most obscure jerseys that you saw? Because we were doing the game on the way there where you try and see if you can spot one from every team. But we were really enjoying some of the odd ones that we saw. We didn't get to see a punter jersey, but I saw a Matthew Slater Patriots jersey, which is brilliant to have a special teams player jersey, and a Younghoe Koo Falcons jersey, which again, a kicker jersey I'm a huge fan of. Did either of you see any that you were really interested in?
Oh man, it's been a long time since then.
Since yesterday.
Yeah.
I don't think I saw any really good ones, which I'm really disappointed about. Because there's so many fun ones, isn't there?
I saw one that I seen one that confused me, and it confused me and my brothers as well, because it was a Bears jersey and it said 50, and on the name was retired tight end. So I don't know if this guy was like a retired tight end or whether it was a special shirt or what. And I was just there like,
for his 50th birthday or something. Yeah.
I don't know what that was about, but I did see a jersey that said retired tight end on it,
I like that. My favorite one that I saw yesterday was a misprinted DeAndre Hopkisson Titans jersey. I really enjoyed that one. But let's get back onto our wild card.
One thing that did happen is my little brother wore a Kelsey shirt. Now, the amount of people that mentioned Taylor Swift to us was unreal. And he didn't wear it because of that. He's a Panthers fan. But the only Panthers shirt he's got is Christian McCaffrey, and he's still a bit bitter about the fact that McCaffrey's now at the 49ers. So he wanted to wear his Kelsey one. Everyone, where's Swifty? Where's Swifty? And you were just like, oh, guys, please.
Yeah,
please.
I don't want to see any more Taylor Swift social media stuff. Moving swiftly on. Hannah, what is your wild card of the week?
So I haven't got any more London games, so that was a bit sad. So I randomly picked a game this week, and it turns out that the Bills are playing in division. They're playing against the Patriots this week. So I think this week that Stephon Diggs will have more receiving yards than all of the Patriots wide receivers put together.
I would not be surprised by this one. When you look into the passing stats, I mean, Kendrick Bourne actually had quite a big week this week. He had 89 yards, but then the rest of them, there was 13 yards from the other two combined. So that's 112, which I think Stephon Diggs probably beat this.
He got 100.
Oh, did he get 100? Okay, so it could be a really interesting line. Paul, what about you? What did you think could happen this week?
Really sorry to any Eagles fans, but I see them getting their next loss to the Miami Dolphins this week. I think that Miami's Dolphins offense is quite exciting, and I think they're just going to want to just keep putting points up and points up. But I think it'll be a case of who has the ball last, like a Bills Chiefs game there.
Yeah.
Whoever has the ball last wins, and I think the Dolphins managed to do it.
I know we haven't got much time, but just quickly, the Eagles just don't. The offense just doesn't look quite right, does it? It's not clicking on all cylinders at this point.
That's what I was going to say. Like every game you watch the Eagles so far, and they were undefeated until last night. But you always felt like the other team could beat them. When the Rams played them, I feel like if we'd executed better, we could have toppled them. Like it just doesn't quite seem like it's working. I'm not sure if it's individual errors or, I mean, obviously they lost their OC and DC, which is going to make a huge difference. But yeah, they don't look like they're quite there yet. Talking about teams that don't look like they're quite there yet, both the Raiders and the Bears could well be playing with backup quarterbacks next week. It could be Tyson Bagent versus Brian Hoyer. Which is the offensive spectacle that you all want to see. I am going to say that this finishes with less than 20 combined points, and I'm concerned about this one. So that brings us to the end of the show. Thank you so much for tuning in, and thank you to my wonderful co-hosts. Be sure to subscribe and follow us on X at Wildcard Rewind. Also, head on over to our YouTube channel, search for Fantasy Wildcard Podcast Network. Make sure you give us a subscribe. And yeah, we will see you next week where we'll be reviewing Week 7. Thank you so much.